The morning sun blazed over the Nevada desert, glinting off the steel hull of an M1 Abrams tank sitting motionless in the dust. Around it, a group of U.S. Army engineers stood frustrated, hands on hips, faces streaked with sweat and disappointment. For 3 days, the tank had been dead. Its powerful turbine engine wouldn't start, its systems flickered erratically, and no diagnostic scan could find the fault. They had tried everything, new components, rewiring, even software resets. Nothing worked. The M1, pride of American armored might, had become a lifeless monument. The project was top secret, an advanced variant meant for a demonstration before high-ranking officials. The engineers knew failure was not an option. But no one could fix it. The chief engineer finally broke the silence. "Sir, we've replaced the modules, we've tested the circuits, and the damn thing still won't power up. It's like it's rejecting everything we give it." The commanding officer's jaw tightened. "The general won't be happy about this." Hours later, the general himself arrived, a stern man with eyes sharp as steel. He surveyed the scene with disappointment and authority. "You're telling me the most advanced tank in the U.S. Army can't start?" The chief nodded nervously. "Sir, we've run every diagnostic. There's something we're missing." The general stood silently for a moment, then said something unexpected. "There's one man who might know what's wrong, but he's been out of service for nearly 20 years. The engineers exchanged puzzled looks. "Who, sir?" "Sergeant Major William Iron Bill Harris," the general replied. "He worked on Abrams before most of you even knew how to hold a wrench. He knew these machines like living things." A few hours later, an old pickup truck rolled up the dusty base road. Out stepped a tall, weathered man in a faded army jacket, gray in his beard and steady in his step. His eyes scanned the lifeless tank like a doctor sizing up a patient. "Heard you folks got a sick Abrams," he said, his voice rough but calm. The engineers, skeptical but curious, led him to the vehicle. The general nodded at him respectfully. "Good to see you again, Bill. I know it's been a while, but we could use that old magic of yours." The old veteran smirked slightly. "Magic? Nah, sir, just respect for the machine." Without another word, he climbed onto the tank, ran his hand along the armor, and peered into the engine bay. His movements were slow but deliberate, almost like he was listening to the tank breathe. "You said she won't start." "Nothing, sir. No ignition, no response." The chief engineer replied. Bill nodded and motioned for a wrench. The younger engineers hesitated but handed it over. For the next 20 minutes, he inspected parts they had already replaced twice. He didn't use digital scanners or laptops, just tools, instincts, and memory. Finally, he leaned over the engine's access panel and tapped a line of cables with his wrench. "Right here," he said quietly. "You got a misaligned magnetic relay. The diagnostics can't catch it because it's not broken. It's just out of sync. The turbine's computer doesn't know it's allowed to start." The engineers blinked, but we checked those relays. One protested. Bill smiled. "You checked them by the book, but Abrams don't always read the book." He grabbed a screwdriver, adjusted something by feel, and motioned for them to try again. The chief engineer turned the ignition control. For a second there was silence. Then, with a roar like thunder, the M1 Abrams came to life, its turbine screaming, its systems lighting up like a Christmas tree. Dust swirled as the tank's engine stabilized, humming with perfect balance. The old man patted the side of the tank affectionately. "There you go, sweetheart. Told you she just needed a little reminder." The general's lips curved into a grin. The engineers stood in disbelief, some clapping, others shaking their heads in awe. "How did you even know?" one of them asked. Bill shrugged. "These tanks, son, they talk. You just gotta listen close enough." The general stepped forward. "You just saved us millions of dollars and a lot of embarrassment, Bill. How'd you like to come back? Train some of these young folks?" The veteran looked at the eager faces around him, then back at the roaring tank. "I've done my time, sir, but I'll stay for a few days. These kids have the skill. They just need to learn the soul behind the steel." Over the next few days, the old veteran taught them things that weren't in any manual. He showed them how to feel for vibration through the armor, how to sense when a component was misaligned by sound alone, and how to respect every bolt and wire as part of a living system. The engineers, once skeptical, now watched him with admiration. One night, as the desert wind howled across the base, the general found Bill sitting beside the tank, sipping coffee from an old army mug. "You miss it, don't you?" the general asked. Bill smiled faintly. "Every damn day, these machines, they were part of me, but what I really miss is the brotherhood, the way a team came together when everything was on the line." The general nodded quietly. "You gave them that today." At dawn, when the testing began, the same Abrams tank rolled across the desert with perfect precision. It fired, maneuvered, and performed flawlessly, impressing every officer in attendance. The engineers stood taller now, their pride restored, not because they fixed a tank, but because they learned what it meant to care for one. As the demonstration ended, the general looked around for Bill, but his pickup truck was already gone, kicking up dust down the long desert road. On the tank side, someone had painted 2 words in neat stencil letters, "Iron Bill." The general smiled softly. "Some legends don't fade," he said. "They just pass the torch." And somewhere out there, the forgotten veteran drove toward the horizon, leaving behind not just a working tank, but a new generation of engineers who finally understood what it meant to keep an Abrams alive. The desert air shimmered with heat as the noon sun beat down on the vast expanse of the U.S. Army's testing range. In the center of the base sat an M1 Abrams tank, silent, motionless, and broken. Around it, a dozen engineers stood defeated. For days, they had tried everything, recalibrating systems, replacing circuit boards, rewiring the control unit. Yet, the mighty engine that once roared with unmatched power refused to start. Sweat dripped from foreheads, tension hung thick in the air, and frustration was slowly turning to despair. This wasn't just another tank. It was a classified prototype meant to showcase new performance systems to top brass in just 2 days. The chief engineer ran another diagnostic scan, staring at the screen as lines of code scrolled endlessly. "It's clean again. No faults detected," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "But it's still dead." His assistant looked helpless. "Sir, maybe the power module's corrupted again." The chief shook his head. "We've replaced it twice. It's not the module. It's something deeper." That was when a black SUV pulled up, dust rising behind it. Out stepped a general, stern, faced calm but visibly impatient. The engineers straightened immediately. "Report," he ordered. The chief engineer saluted, hesitant. "Sir, we've tried everything. The new hybrid system isn't responding to ignition. No mechanical failure, no system errors. It just won't engage." The general studied the silent tank, then turned to the team. "This tank is the future of armored warfare, and you're telling me it's a lifeless shell?" The chief's voice faltered. "Yes, sir, for now." The general sighed deeply, his mind searching for answers, until he murmured something almost to himself. "Maybe we're missing what the old ways knew." He looked up. "There's one man who might know how to fix this. He hasn't worn the uniform in years, but he built his life around these machines." The engineers exchanged looks. "Who, sir?" The general's eyes hardened with memory. "Sergeant Major William Iron Bill Harris, last of the old Abrams crew." Hours later, an old pickup truck rolled across the dusty plain. Out stepped a man who looked like time itself had tested him, a tall figure in faded fatigues, a streak of silver in his beard, eyes sharp with experience. He walked toward the silent tank with a slow, steady pace. The engineers glanced at each other, uncertain whether to laugh or salute. The general met him halfway. "Bill," he said with respect, "it's been a long time." The old veteran nodded, gaze fixed on the M1. "Heard one of my girls stopped breathing," he said softly. The general gestured. "She won't start. We've tried every test." Bill set down his duffel and climbed onto the tank's hull with practiced ease. He brushed a hand along the armor like greeting an old friend. "She's talking," he murmured. "You just ain't listening." The young engineers exchanged skeptical smiles, but they stayed quiet as Bill opened access panels, listening, feeling, and occasionally muttering under his breath. He didn't touch the computers, he didn't ask for tools, he simply studied. You know, he said, the Abrams was never just about power, it's about rhythm. When one part's offbeat, the whole thing goes silent. He pointed to a bundle of wires. You replaced these twice, the chief engineer said. They're fine. No, Bill replied, crouching closer. They're too tight. The ground relay's out of alignment by a hair. The voltage can't sync with the turbine's ignition loop. It's trying to start, but it's choking itself. The chief frowned, but the diagnostics didn't catch it. Bill smirked. Machines like this don't talk to computers, son. They talk to hands. He took a screwdriver from his pocket-holed, worn handle taped with cloth, and loosened a bolt by just a fraction. He adjusted a relay by feel alone, then stepped back. Try it now. The chief hesitated but obeyed. He turned the ignition. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a deep rumble echoed through the desert as the tank's turbine roared to life. The ground trembled, dust exploded around the tracks, and the once dead Abrams awakened with a fierce growl. The engineers jumped back, their faces lighting up in disbelief and excitement. It's alive, one shouted. The old veteran smiled faintly, resting a hand on the armor. She just needed someone to remember how she breathes. The general grinned for the first time that day. Bill, you've done it again. You've saved the Army's pride. The veteran chuckled. I didn't save her, sir. I just listened. Over the next few days, Bill stayed on the base, teaching the engineers lessons no manual ever could. He showed them how to feel the vibrations of the engine through the hull, how to sense misfires through the pitch of the turbine, and how to trust instinct as much as instruments. They watched him with reverence. His every motion was a bridge between man and machine. At night, when the desert grew quiet, Bill would sit beside the tank with a cup of coffee, eyes lost in the stars. The general joined him one evening. You ever miss it? He asked. Bill nodded. Every day, but what I miss most isn't the tanks, it's the people, the crews who'd trust each other with their lives, the sound of that engine at dawn before a mission. The general smiled softly. You gave that back to them today. On the day of the official test, the M1 Abrams thundered across the desert with perfect precision, turning, firing, maneuvering like a living beast. The officers applauded as the engineers watched proudly. For them, it wasn't just a repair, it was a revival. The general turned to thank Bill, but the old man's truck was already gone, driving into the golden horizon. On the side of the tank, freshly painted in small black letters, someone had written 2 words, Iron Bill. The general smiled and murmured, some soldiers never retire. They just ride on in spirit. And somewhere, far down that dusty road, the forgotten veteran smiled to himself, knowing he had once again given life to the heart of steel that had carried his generation through war and peace alike.